right. Hello. Hopefully I didn't ask you if my sound sounded okay. But anyway, hopefully it does.
Yeah.
I am tonight having a chat with Dan Franco, who I'm really excited to have on here in the Facebook group. If you guys are watching along on Facebook, you're probably watching us on either maybe my profile or maybe Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. And if you're watching along later on YouTube, then I would love you guys to be able to catch, lots of different videos and interviews and all things parenting and emotional intelligence. So as everyone says, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any other videos and things that I'm putting up here and there. So yeah, I kind of want to jump straight into it and not waste any time, because I feel like Dan and I could probably go on for a while with the conversations that we've had so far. He is the founder of Lifting Dads podcast and the founder of the Best Self movement. And he's one of the dads in our group. He's in Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. He's so engaged and so supportive and has such great comments and thoughts. And I just love, when you put yourself out there and your beliefs and your experiences and everything like that. I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to have him on and ask questions. And I think just sharing your story, I think, is going to be really powerful for the parents watching along. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's humbling to even be able to share even part of my story. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I know that often, every couple of weeks I try and have someone on to interview them and ask their story and ask how they got to where they are now and what they're doing in terms of, for families and for parents and things like that. But they're not often dads or speaking about their journey into fatherhood. So I'm actually really I'm excited. I was like, kids, get in bed, like eat your dinner. So, and we've just spoken before we hit go live about the craziness of, particularly at Dan's house. He said there was tears and you're trying to get on Zoom, you got at 8 o'clock, and I'm like, yep, I hear you. So we're all about the crazy life. But anyway, why don't we start off with letting people know a little bit about who you are and the work, the podcast and the work that you're doing, how you sort of became what I think, but this is just my opinion, a conscious or a really intentional dad in that kind of role in your life.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll start with the Lifting Dads podcast. So that was kind of birthed when my daughter Betty was born, so 4.5 years ago now, or probably earlier than that, because it was when we found out that Chrissy, my partner, or my wife, was pregnant with Betty. And you were talking just before about not having many dads that you kind of had on to interview, and that was my greatest problem. Like, I was madly jumping online for information that was not only relevant to pregnancy and to having a baby and what the mother goes through, and what the first kind of part of the pregnancy is going to be, what the end's going to be like, but then relevant to being a dad, what it's like to be a dad. And typically, and we might touch more on this later, but typically, dads generally don't talk about their experiences of being a dad. There's look around, there's mothers groups, there's so much information for mothers, and there's just, for dads, there's not much. So, at that time, I just thought, and it's funny because it only was launched last year on Father's Day last year, but there was that kind of that need inside me that we need to start sharing our stories. So, the Lifting Dads podcast is about getting, a diverse community of dads together to get on and share their story and, share their experience of being a dad. And, anyone that comes on that podcast knows that, there's strength in that vulnerability of sharing their story. So, my story is completely different to every dad that I've had on the podcast so far, but I've got so much value from having the conversation. I've picked up little bits and pieces along the way of, okay, well, that's for me something that I resonate with, and I think I can use that in parenting. So that's where Dad's Lifting Dads kind of started from. That's the reason behind it. I'm so passionate about it because it's just something that I just feel dads need. I feel men need. So, I'm hoping a lot of, men that want to become fathers start listening to it as well and get involved with it, because it's scary. It's, it's a scary time for, not just the mother and the father, but as a couple, everything shifts. And then, we've recently had our second child, Axel, and the dynamics have completely shifted again. So now it's like, who can I turn to? Who can I ask? What information can I get? So that's where that started from. I'll lead into the next question. So best self movement. That started last year. So at the height of COVID last year, I decided to leave 13 years of retail and logistics, so managing big box retail and logistics behind, so coaching, leading, developing people for 13 years, and jump into the deep end and start a personal training and health and wellness business. So that has been almost a year. So yeah, start of May was a year. I started that process with that. So again, something I'm truly passionate about is, everyone, I guess, bettering themselves. I'm not perfect, and I kind of, all of these things is kind of a real selfish kind of reason they've come about, because it's not just solely, but the reason behind it was because I'm yearning for it. I'm yearning to talk to other dads. I'm yearning to better myself. And, my hope is to inspire other dads, other people to do the same thing. So that's where that kind of came from. So
I love it. It sounds like you've had the most massive 12 months. Well, this year, last year, it's sort of been pretty huge, and the best self movement sounds incredible. Like, bringing the best version of you out, not just for those around you and your family, but for yourself as well. I think, I'm a huge fan of personal development, health and well-being, and things like that as well, and spirituality. So, and I know we sort of watch each other's posts, and like I just follow your stuff, and I just feel like it's such a breath of fresh air, coming from a dad as well. And I don't want to like generalize and do a sweeping kind of brush over all men or dads, but that's something I wanted to ask you, is what, from the podcast and the conversations you've had with other men, other dads, what are some of the sort of themes coming out around that they're talking about, or the struggles that they're having, or the things that have like resonated with you? I think you said some of the things you've tucked away and you'll sort of use yourself, or you've learnt from other people. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, so I'll start with, I think it's not a sweeping generalization to say men just don't talk about this stuff. And that's the common theme across, just about everyone that I've talked to. It's, that they're surprised that I'm asking about it. And it is, I'm, happy to say that it is getting better, but it's slow. It is slow. For me, you just look, there's so much generational conditioning, so much social conditioning, so much cultural conditioning around men. Men are kind of there to be men, to man up, to not cry, to not talk about their feelings, to not, talk about, things that just weren't talked about in the past, and when I talk generationally, I'm 37, so my dad, is in his 60s now, but it's like, they went to work, they'd kind of stopped work, mum had the baby, and then dad would go back to work. Things like that. That's how it was back then, and it doesn't mean that just that's the way it was back then, so that's the way it has to be now. But there's so much conditioning and things behind that as to why men are the way they are, you know. And
Yes,
I know,
I can see that. And that made me think, sorry to cut you off, but when you said, you know, my dad, like our parents had their cultural, their social kind of condition, you know, the way that they were, their way of being. What has for you, because I also think men don't talk about this stuff and they're not talking to their kids or their boys about this stuff. So their boys are not talking about emotions and how they feel and what's wrong and coping with it and stuff. They're squashing it or pushing it under the rug. How did you make almost like a break free or a transition? How did you move from, I'm just going to do what my dad did and that's how we parent, that's what dads do, to how you are now? Because it seems like such a 180, a flip.
yeah, no, good question, because it's, and I've thought a lot about it, and it for me, it stems from, I think, 13 years of being in the retail and logistics space, and being managing businesses and big box businesses. You kind of look at your mentors in a sense of, you look at what's good and what works for them, and you take that, and then what doesn't work or what you don't resonate with, you kind of push to the side. So kind of growing up and seeing dad be real stoic, and you know, I talked to you in about this before. You know, I only ever saw him cry, you know, twice in my life so far. So, you know, and both times one time he hid away, the second time he apologized for crying in front of me. And that's the kind of that generational conditioning that, you know, it, at the time I didn't think anything of it, but as soon as I became a father, it's like this switch flicked inside me, and I'm like, I it was actually kind of stemmed from a week after Betty was born. We got home, and it's crazy. So anyone that has children will know what that first kind of period feels like. You know, and it's again different for everyone, but you know, the common theme is it's a massive just overwhelm of feeling and emotion and just everything. So, you know, we were home, and I was lying in bed, and I remember this feeling just being really cold. I was started shivering, and I was like, okay, I'll just go and jump, have a shower, I'll warm myself up. And as I was kind of warming myself up in the shower, I kind of like buckled and kind of fell to the ground, and was just lying essentially in the fetal position, just wailing, just all this emotion and all this just energy was just purging itself from me essentially. And it was just like, and at the time, again, I thought, I was like, okay, this is my rock bottom moment of, you know, being a, you know, how can I start out being a dad like this? I'm just like, how can I won't be able to do this? And kind of my only coping mechanism was, at the time, was like, who else do you know that's a dad? And I kind of rattled off a couple of names in my head and go, okay, if they're doing it, well, then there's no reason you can't do it. So to kind of pick yourself up and, you know, and move forward with it. And I didn't, you know, I don't think I was as aware, well, I definitely wasn't as aware back then as I am now, but that was kind of the defining moment for me, that, hey, there's a lot of stuff to deal with there. There's a lot of emotion to deal with there. There's a lot of bottled up feelings. There's a lot of kind of stuff there that you're going to have to deal with at some point. And again, we'll talk about this a bit further down the track, but, you know, at that time I was just like, okay, yeah, move on. Yeah, I'll now do that. But there was that part of me that was like, I can't not show emotion to my daughter. I can't not, you know, there was this, I just remember holding her for the first time, and just nothing but unconditional love kind of was just washed over me, and just there was just this feeling that I never wanted to see Betty get hurt. I never wanted to, her to experience any pain. And it's ridiculous to say, right, because they're all going to go through it, but you just feel that. And, again, any parent would know that feeling, but it's like, I just can't not. I've got all these emotions, and if I hide them away, if I just don't show them, if I don't cry in front of her, it's not only going to be detrimental to me, but it's going to be detrimental to her.
Yeah.
She'll think that, oh, well, that's just, and now having Axel, having a boy, it's like, well, I want him to know that men cry. I want him to know that men, have feelings, have emotions, struggle with, and it's the same, I guess, as parents. Parents often think that they shouldn't make mistakes in front of kids. But what are we telling our kids if we don't make mistakes in front of them? We're perfect, right? Like there's no such thing. Like I'm far from a perfect parent. Like there's horrible things that I've done as a parent, but it's just like, if I don't, the difference there is that you make the mistake and then you correct it. You correct it and you acknowledge it. If I yell at Betty, then I make sure that I talk to her about it and tell her what was going on, but I also apologize for it and correct it and go, well, that's not right. I shouldn't treat you that way. And then kind of, it's just for me that old kind of, and this is why, that I love, or I'm so passionate about dads lifting dads, is because for me that that funny dad kind of belief, that that stoic dad, that the dad that doesn't have feelings, that's all old stuff. That's all old garbage to me. It's the furthest thing from where we are now. And look at, and I don't want to dive into this too deep because there's far smarter heads about it, but look at the toxic masculinity that's created today. Look at the kind of the men that we've raised today because of those beliefs.
Yeah.
And for me, that's just not the world that I want, not only in my circle, but the world. I don't want to live in a world like that. And I can't change what goes on in the world, but I can change what goes on in my, the four walls of my house. And well, not even the four walls of my house, I can change what goes on the four walls of me. So I can change me. That's the only person I can change and control. So that's why I'm so just driven to, and it's not, I'm not saying that, my dad did anything wrong. And I'm not saying that other parents are doing anything wrong, but I'm just saying that's how I want to move forward. And that's how, that's what best serves me, because I can tell you now, and I'll go into, as deep and as vulnerable as you want me to go, but there's stuff that's just purged out of me just because of I haven't dealt with it. And it's been more healing. And I remember a quote coming across your page. It was, heal the child, heal the parent, heal the child. But for me, it's heal the parent, free the child, and not just our own inner child, but our children. You got to heal you to let your your inner child and your actual children as well be free, because otherwise they're subject to your conditioning, your limiting beliefs, your all of that stuff. And I don't want that for Betty and Axel. I want to give them, and again, I can't control what happens to them, but I can do my best to put them in what I feel is a better position to deal with emotion, to deal with feelings, to deal with just all of that moving forward. Like I said, I can't stop them getting hurt. I can't stop them, being upset. I can't stop their heart breaking.
Yeah.
But I can, let them know that it's okay to feel all of those feelings. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be, sad. It's okay to be, all of that stuff. So
wow.
Yeah.
And I guess that's stuff that you potentially didn't hear as a kid. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel frustrated, let down, disappointed, lonely, and share it, open it, like let that out. That's a guess. I think for many guys, sometimes that's the reality of when they were younger. That's how those feelings or behavior were dealt with, like just to say, toughen up or man up, or I don't want to see that, or don't be a baby, don't be a girl, But yeah, like you were saying, sort of, it's up to us, once we have the awareness, to think, wow, there is a different way of being that I can be. There's a different path that I can lay out for my kids. And the stuff that I realize now was laid onto me. And again, I actually love that you also said, it's not that we're blaming, or saying our parents did a bad job. I often talk about that as well, because I had anxiety growing up as a teenager and into my 20s, and I'm 1000%, want to get across to people that that's not my parents' fault. They didn't raise me in a certain way to not be able to manage my emotions and things like that. Same as your parents, we all do the best we can with the tools we have, or the level of consciousness that we're at. And now you're like, both of us are just an example of how we have been able to raise our awareness and our consciousness of what emotions are, how they are not good, not bad. They just are. They're just information. They're just data. They're just signals coming up from within, telling us, hey, something's happening here, pay attention. And it's almost like normalizing them, right? And taking away that sort of stigma of this emotion are bad, and these ones are good. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, perfect. And for me, it's like, when, and to kind of sum that first part up, when you know better, you do better. So it's not a matter of, we only do the best with what we've got at that time.
Yeah.
But when we know better, we then do better. So, and for your parents, for example, when you look, anxiety, depression, mental health, even 10 years ago just wasn't, there's so much stigma attached to it now, let alone 10 years ago. It was like, we'll just sweep that under the rug. We'll just, we won't talk about that, just because we did not understand it, and we don't generally, or we fear what we don't understand. So that, it's just it's a real, and the emotion one for me is anger was a big one, especially when with Betty, she's 4.5 now. So my first kind of go-to emotion was anger. And I never talked about it for a long time because there was so much shame and guilt attached to it. There's so much shame and guilt that I've got a 2-year-old child in front of me and I'm yelling and screaming at her.
Yeah.
And so I just, I wouldn't talk about that with anyone. But, it recently came about, and this is me again, not being a perfect parent. So, I was talking to she was doing something and I asked her not to do it. And she kept doing it. And one of my biggest triggers, and understanding your triggers is a real powerful tool, one of my biggest triggers is when she doesn't listen to me.
Yeah.
And so my first, I got my first tool out of the tool belt, which is anger. So, yelling, screaming, still doesn't listen. Okay, I'll grab it and then I'll throw it off we've got a back deck here at home. I threw it off the back deck. And as I've let it go, I've gone, oh my God, like, who's the parent, who's the child here? Like, seriously. So I've gone, I've picked her up. I've talked to her about it, that we've gone walk down the backyard and we've kind of picked it up. And for me, it was understanding not so much that, there's nothing wrong with being angry, but it's it's how you either react to the anger, and I reacted in that moment, whereas I should have responded in that moment. And then I have that awareness now that I can dig a little bit deeper and go, okay, well, where's that anger coming from, or where's that trigger coming from? And again, it comes from being a child. When Betty doesn't listen to me, it takes me back to being a kid when, my parents didn't listen to me, when I didn't feel seen, when I didn't feel heard, when I didn't feel supported or loved. And I'm like this, this child again. And, try talking to parents of my generation now about, generational trauma and inner child stuff. Like, it just, what are you talking about? You're crazy. We never, subject you to any trauma.
Yeah.
But you know, because we think trauma is a big capital T, domestic, like
Yeah.
violence and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, trauma can be in, you know, just never heard that, you know, I love you, was never hugged, was never kind of said, you know, you're enough. It's just such a funny thing. But when you're aware of all of that, and I'm not saying you're not going to then react, because like I said, I'm definitely not a perfect parent, and I don't think I've ever met a perfect parent. So you're still going to react, but you go, okay, well, now how do I move forward from this, and how can I understand this, and just go layer and layer and layer. And for me, parenting it's all about, you know, it's all about the parent. You know, the child's doing what the child's going to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're the fully developed ones here. You know, we're the ones that have had that, you know, and, you know, we both geek out about neuroscience and all that kind of stuff, right? So, you know, we're the ones that are at the stage of our life where we should know better, but we hold our kids to such a high standard that, you know, if they yell, if they scream, if they chuck a tantrum, we think that that's like they're doing something wrong. But it's like, no, they're just doing what a child's supposed to do.
Yeah.
A child is supposed to push boundaries. And, you know, we talked about this just before we got on. Like, Betty's really going through it at the moment. She's just had you know, we've got Axel, he's, you know, 2 months now. So all of a sudden she had dad, mum for 4 years by herself. Now we've chucked in this brand new thing, and she's like, well, who is this? What's he doing? He's taking away mum's time. He's taking away dad's time. Like, it's all, and, you know, typically, you know, not typically at that kind of 4 year mark, everything's about the child. Everything's about me. It's selfish.
Yeah.
And when we understand that, we can go, okay, cool. Okay, now I know I'll try this tool. And the only thing I think as parents, we can run out of tools. Because, you know, Chrissy and I talk about it now. We're at a point with Betty where we've run out of tools. Like we just don't know what to do now. So, okay, who can we reach out to? What course can we do? You know, how can we get help? Because we need to be able to deal with this in a way that adults should be able to deal with it.
Yeah. And
Because
that's
yelling at it, screaming at it.
Yeah. And you've hit the nail on the head. Like, now we have, you know, when you say, you know, we use our tools and our strategies and things like that, we have now so much more understanding and awareness and the knowledge of neuroscience in our kids' brains and what's going on there, what's missing, like how much of the map is missing, if you will. And just knowing, this is stuff I often talk to parents about right at the start of our journey, because I think if you don't understand this foundational information about what's going on in your child's brain, in their level of development, where they're at, and just the simple milestones and things like that, you look at your child's behavior and all you see is that surface level above the iceberg, that it's pissing you off, or that it's rude, or that it's defiant, or that it's selfish, or that it's, you know, naughty and things like that. And you miss all that understanding and the information that's beneath the iceberg that shows us why they're acting that way, why they have those big emotions, why they have the challenging behavior, why they can't grasp this concept, or why they seem so slow and lazy and egocentric and all of that. Like, it's almost like such an amazing time now to have kids. I'm sure we will say that as the years go on, but because we know and so much more about the brain, and yet we still are only scratching the surface. But sorry to go on a segue with that, but I know what you mean, that feeling of using lots of tools, and then almost sometimes I talk about surrendering to what is. You know, Betty can't cope in this moment. She's flipping out. Maybe she's lashing out or melting down. And that is literally just her saying, I can't cope with this. I haven't got this skill yet. Can't regulate my emotions. It's too much. I need you. Have you got me? This is out of my depth. And we have to be there to say, yeah, I've got you. This is bloody tough and this is hard, but I'm here. You know, I'm going to help you through this, and we will make it through the other side. Like, this too shall end. It always does, even though it doesn't seem like in the moment. But yeah, it's it's a journey, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
Uh,
It's funny because we talk about when, we look at a baby and we go, oh, it's so pure and innocent. But a toddler's the same. A toddler doesn't have a vindictive bone in their body. We put our cynical lens sometimes and our limiting beliefs on the toddler, thinking that, oh, they're doing this because they don't like us or they hate us, or
yeah.
we put our kind of our real cynical view of the world on them, where I'm a big believer and about where we think we're here to teach the child, but the child's here to actually teach us what life's about. So and we need to understand that. When we understand that, we can go, okay, cool. And then and again, you talked about, then it's not easy to pull yourself out of that moment when it's happening. It's not easy when they're chucking a tantrum, and then we're pushing boundaries, and they're they're yelling, they're screaming, they're kicking, they're being physical. It's not easy to remove yourself. But again, we're the parents, so we're the ones that need to get better at dealing with it, not the child. The child will learn those skills, and who are they going to learn those skills from? The adult, the parent.
Us.
So if they're yelling, screaming, kicking, if they're yelling, so they're holding a mirror up to us. They're pointing out our flaws. Chrissy and I talked about this the other day, because Betty started to hit a bit more. She hasn't hit for I don't know how long, since when she started to be able to verbalize her feelings. She kind of stopped any physical kind of thing, but she started hitting again. But she's also started to she likes Kung Fu Panda, the movie Kung Fu Panda. So I don't know if it's related to that or to something else, but we also, she started to yell a lot more. And me and Chrissy, when we talk and discuss things, like, I'm super passionate. I come from an Italian family, so I'm quite loud and boisterous. So I don't know, she often says, stop fighting, and we're not even fighting, we're just talking. So, we kind of had the conversation, is like, is she started to yell more because she thinks she's picking that up from us? Is she starting to say certain things because she's picking that up from us? So they're just little sponges, and they will, we could say so much to them, but they're going to pick up more from what we actually do.
Yep.
It's just kids fascinate me. That's why I'm so, I'm geeked about this. I'm passionate about this. I'm, and that's probably why have to answer one of your questions at the start, why have I ended up being so conscious, kind of that conscious parenting style, is because it's something that's so passionate, and I just geek out about, because it's just such a unknown thing, and ultimately it's that mirror that's held up to us, that the child's just doing what the child does. Is up to the parent to
Oh, so true. I have a few questions that were sent through by some parents over the week, and for you guys who actually are watching on Facebook, I know there's a few of you guys. We've had some beautiful comments, actually. Some of the parents saying that it's so awesome to hear from dads. And Dad, actually, a lovely guy I know, but I haven't seen in a long time, has said sometimes we underestimate the importance of ourselves as dads too. What do you think about that?
It's funny. It's funny that that's kind of come up, because I read I'm part of another dad's group as well, and I read a thing today about birth trauma, so specifically related to the dad. So what the dad sees while the wife's going through birth, and kind of they're now saying that 1 in 10 dads are experiencing postnatal depression because of what they have seen as the birth unfolds, kind of thing. And I think we tend not to, and I know being a kind of a sensitive soul that I am, I don't want to take away from the mum. I don't want to take away from Chrissy and her experience. So, you know, when Chrissy gets pregnant, and that whole pregnancy period, the birthing period, the fourth trimester period, so after birth and that kind of thing, when you think about it, who's it specifically? You know, who gets all the questions? How's mum? How's the bub? You know, what's happening? What are you guys doing? You know, here's the support for mum. Here's the support for bub. No, generally there's no questions about the dad. I'm not standing here going, oh, well, that's not fair. But as a dad, you kind of go, oh, okay, that's cool. And we accept it. We go, yeah, that's cool. And that's probably why we, I guess, withdraw ourselves from the situation, because you don't want to, you know, steal the show. You don't want to steal the show. You know, when Betty was born, I was so scared that I didn't get to experience the beautiful kind of process of birth that was unfolded in front of me. You know, as you know, Axel came about, I got to experience that. I got to see how powerful, you know, Chrissy could push her body, you know, how powerful and capable a female's body is, and that whole experience. And I got to really experience that. But it's very hard for some dads to assert themselves. You know, I'm kind of that kind of person that, well, I want to be there. You know, I was there for every scan with Betty. I was there for kind of every doctor's visit with Betty. I was, you know, and it was the same with Axel. And kind of, I asserted myself into that situation. But it's it's hard for a dad even to build that connection through those 9 months. And then thereafter, because it's like, well, now what's my role?
Yeah.
What is my role as a dad? And, you know, I can tell you the role, you're there it's exactly the same. It just looks different. You know, if your wife's breastfeeding, your role is to support that. You know, if you have to go back to work to support financially, that's your role. But then you come home and then you slip into the, you know, the role of being a dad. So you help out where you can, you do what you can, you do the washing, you do the folding, you do, you know, whatever that needs to be done. But you have to assert yourself. And I think, you know, for mums and partners, that, you know, what can they do to kind of, if their husband or partner's not doing that, is communicate. One of the best things that we can do is communicate, especially in those stressful times. Communicate, you know, be very specific and direct. No, you shouldn't have to tell us to put the garbage out, but please tell us to put the garbage out. Because we both think differently, and we're just two different, you know, two different entities. We're wired so differently. And you can talk about the masculine and the feminine kind of energies and polarities and how different they are, but we're so different. You know, women have that, they're kind of gifted that nurturing and that side of it. Dads aren't. We have to kind of, it's a kind of a skill that we have to learn. You know, I've heard, and I don't know how true it is, but a mum can, you know, hear the difference between her child, you know, crying and another child crying, whereas a dad can't. A dad doesn't have that skill kind of thing built into them. So yeah, it's a deep topic to go into, but it's, if you want to just look at surface level, it's just like, it's hard for dads to assert themselves in that situation because it's so much about the mum. But mums communicate with the dad. You know, like I said, you shouldn't have to ask for help, but please bloody ask for help.
Yeah, it's a two-way flow. You know, it's got to be. One of the other questions that I want, there's a few here, and I knew that we would talk for I said we'll just aim for half an hour. It'll end up being an hour, but that's fine. I've got nowhere to be. I might just pick a couple of them. One of them was, what can mums say to dads that can help dads reflect and plan for better parenting? So that's how the question came through. And I wonder whether, answer it from whatever space sort of fits with you. But I kind of read it as, sometimes mums are the ones doing the heavy lifting during the day. Often dads are at work, not always. And if mums, like I know for me, the probably 80-90% of the people I coach, the parents are mums, and the other portion is mums and dads together. And so what advice or what would you say to maybe mums and dads with helping the father sort of have that awareness and that opening and that understanding, being able to reflect on maybe their parenting or the way they were parented and how that's affecting them now? I don't know. What do you take from that question? Sorry, I've just thrown it at you.
No, there's a couple of questions there, and then it was kind of like, it's kind of like, how can I, it's a tough question, right? Because it's like you can only control what you can control, and that's the hardest thing about it, right? You can't make a unconscious or unawakened dad become a conscious and awakened dad. You can't make that happen, because Chrissy didn't make it happen in me. So there was several things that happened for me. But, as I kind of reflected on this question yesterday, it was like, and it goes back to that communication piece. Communicate and be very clear about not only what you want in your partner, as in if you want help with things, but also if you think they can do better. And it's a tough one, because this is now we're going to talk about ego. And as soon as you damage a man's ego, right, you might as well not even talk to them after that, because they're not going to hear anything anyway.
The defenses go up, and I've seen it, if I try to have a conversation the wrong way with my husband, or if I say, look, I've noticed this and we could try this, like if we communicate in the I know best, or this is what we should do and you should stop doing it that way, of course that comes across as a bit of an attack, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know how to counteract that, because for me, and I've gotten, had this conversation with Chrissy last night when I was kind of going through the questions with her. I'm like, I think if she's still kind of, I guess, not so much come at me, but said something and damaged my ego a bit, even me still now, I would be a bit defensive. It wouldn't last as long. And I'd be able to pull myself out from it and be aware of it, but I'd still get defensive straight away. So I think, and I was gifted 4 of these things in a podcast that I kind of saved it, and I've held on to it for a few years. But with any relationship, and it goes for, with your partner, with your child, and even, at work and things like that, make the person feel loved, make them feel supported, make them feel seen, make them feel heard. So if you can kind of do those 4 things, then you might be able to open that conversation and have the conversation, because you anyone that wants a conversation that wants to be deeper than surface level, you want it to be a 2-way conversation.
Yeah.
You want to be able to talk about it. You want to be able to talk about the struggles and open up and share experiences and go, okay, well, this isn't working, or what if you're sitting there on your phone, I can't have you sitting there on your phone. I need you, chipping in, pitching in around the house and stuff like that.
Yeah, because you're a team.
Yeah, and I think that you've just got to start the conversation, and and it could be, it could it could work for you straight away and it could not work. You could not talk to each other for weeks on end, but please don't blame me for that, because I'm by no means a relationship expert. But yeah, I think, loved, seen, supported, heard, that's a great starting point. Another good book, and I'm sure many of the people listening now have heard of it, The 5 Love Languages. So read that book and try and speak to your partner or significant other in their preferred language. Because if they're, they're like, I'm morning that, good morning, had a good day yesterday or whatever, and just kind of fills my cup straight away, that's me done for the day. I don't need to hear anything else from her. But if she doesn't say a word to me in the morning, straight away I think I've done something wrong. So it's, and I kind of, and for me as a partner, I openly communicate how I like to get kind of communicated to in those languages. But if your partner, likes to receive gifts and that's their love language, then buy them a gift before you hit them with the hard conversation. Just something like that. You've just got to start the conversation, because I can tell you now, if you don't start the conversation, you're going to resent each other, or one person's going to resent the other person. And, I can tell you how that ends up. And that's my story there as well. Chrissy and I ended up in counselling. In the start of 2019, we were going to go to counselling to level up our marriage. At the end of 2019, we were at counselling to save our marriage. And it's just, and what counselling has done for us since then is built those communication skills.
Wow, yeah.
But yeah, you've got to, it's a conversation, and it's not, none of these are easy conversations, right? It's not easy to tell your partner that, they're doing something wrong, or not even something wrong, but you've got a better way to view it, or I think this is going to work better, or at least let's try this.
Yeah.
Because to them, they're not doing anything wrong. So if you go and say that they're doing something wrong, straight away, ego, defense, lost them.
Yep.
But yeah, go in with that understanding that and 9 times out of 10, they're probably not even aware of it, or they're maybe aware, but not to the extent of how it impacts the situation or you.
Yeah. And that goes both ways, for us as the mums to get the feedback about what we're doing that may or may not be working, or maybe impacting the partner. Yeah, it's both ways. And like you said, it always comes back to, we harp on about it, but communication. And I'm a huge believer, huge fan of that, of communication. So one of the last questions, because I know
I just quickly I can't let this bit go. It's a funny one, because it's a hard one, right? And 9 times out of 10, we would have talked to our mate about it, or our girlfriend about it, or our mum or our dad about it, and that my partner's not doing this and not doing that, yada yada yada. And what we never do is actually talk to the person involved about it, because we fear that, having that conversation. But yeah, so just, if you're talking to someone else about it, turn it back to you and start talking to that person that is actually involved, and have that conversation with them.
Such good advice.
Yeah, just don't. It's like I said, it's not easy, but the other avenue isn't easy either, and it's actually harder. So
Yeah. Wow, I love that. Such good advice. The last question I wanted to ask, there's a few, is what are the biggest mindset challenges for dads in their parenting from your perspective, and how can they overcome these? So biggest mindset challenges for dads. Maybe that goes back to some of the stuff we spoke about right at the start about the conditioning and how we were raised, and what dads or men or boys should and shouldn't do, can and can't say, what emotions they should and shouldn't have, I don't know.
No, exactly that. So you've just got to look at it, right? That generational conditioning, that cultural conditioning, that social conditioning around what a man should or shouldn't be, you know, what a male should and shouldn't be. And, you know, the statistics on, you know, mental health and suicide relating to specifically men, specifically around my age, is just scary. Because they just don't feel like they have that avenue to have an outlet to have that conversation. So honestly, men, we've just got to start breaking this stigma down. You know, that old paradigm of, you know, the dad that just has a joke, the stoic dad, the dad that just laughs and doesn't cry, all of that conditioning, all of those beliefs, we just need to start tearing them down and embrace the dad that does cry, embrace the dad that does open up and share their feelings, embrace it. And I can tell you now, it happens. You know, as a male, you cry in front of someone that's never seen it before. They look at you as if it's you know, and for me, it doesn't worry me because I've surrounded myself with some incredibly empowered men that open up and share their feelings. But I know everyone doesn't have that circle. I know everyone doesn't come from that. And to be honest, I know every man doesn't want to change, and that's okay too. But if we want to see change, especially in our kids, we need to start having the conversation about it. We need to start breaking down those barriers about it. We need to start accepting it. Because otherwise it's just going to be we'll be talking about this for, you know, for years and years, because we're too frightened. You know, it's the same thing about mental health and that stigma associated with it. It's the same thing about the words have lost me now. It's just it's lost me. But it's the same thing. We're too frightened to have, not even so necessarily too frightened, but we don't want to have the conversation, or we think it's a conversation we have to have that is us against them kind of thing. Where we need to have these conversations to break all of those down, to break all of those biases and those, you know, conditionings down. We need to be able to have that conversation. If we're not able to have that conversation, we're never going to move forward.
Yep. That's exactly right. We won't move forward. Things won't change. And for, you know, for anyone, I was going to say, if any, you know, the dads watching this, but I think any mums and dads, anyone watching along, have a think about the family or the extended family or the friends that you know who have kids, and just having that awareness of everyone has their parenting style or their way of being and their habits and the you know, their culture in their family. And just noticing, you know, I think for a lot of parents who are going to be watching this, because they're either watching on YouTube or they're watching in Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. So they're already conscious parents, they're intentional, they want to learn and they want to improve and get better. But I think it's just around, like you said, you know, it's up to us now, us as the parents, not our kids, to start questioning things and making changes and standing up. And by standing up, I mean some of that stuff you said, crying in front of our kids, making mistakes and admitting it in front of our kids, apologizing to our kids, showing our kids that we don't always have our shit together. Like, we stuff up and we can't cope all the time. Sometimes we flip our lid and we say or do things we regret. We're not perfect. Like, I think with that question that was asked, what are the biggest mindset challenges for dads in their parenting and how they can overcome them? Would you say that those are some of the things that dads could potentially look at starting to do or not to do, like those things that we just sort of talked about?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's like we're at the park on Sunday, and there was a dad there that he must have gone to the shop, but there was a group of I think it was an auntie and a nan and a mum there, and the daughter had fallen off one of the bits of equipment and bumped her head. And the dad came along and made a comment about, oh, you're already, stupid now. Imagine now you bumped your head, how stupid you're going to be. And for me to hear that, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, again, and I'm not there sitting there judging the dad, but how are we going to move forward if we don't highlight things like that? If we don't, or if we accept that. And, for me, it wasn't my space to say anything. But for me, I sit there and think, why didn't the nan say something? Why didn't Arnie say something? Why didn't the mum say something? If that's okay, if the dad talks to the child like that, then what kind of child do you think is, how are they going to be raised? And it's just, for me, it's like, again, can't control that, but what can I control? What I do.
Yeah.
And yet you touched on all of those things. We have to normalize not being perfect people. Not even parents, normalize not being perfect people. We think, especially in the world of social media, that we show our highlights reel off, and that's what we want to portray to people. It's the wrong, and then people, not people, kids believe that, because they're the ones that are so susceptible to it. A lot of adults will be able to see through it, but kids can't. They can't see the difference. So we have to normalize it.
Yeah. And I'm kind of lucky in the way that my kids are now too young to be on social media, but I've got nieces and nephews, and I have a look at things that are, I just see things online on Instagram, Facebook, and things like that. And the stuff that is out there that they can watch. I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but it does just, it's a reminder that, as you said, we can see through that stuff. There's a lot of conversation now around how fake and how we do put the best things out there, but our kids don't grasp that. They don't have the cognitive development or the skill to understand that. They don't have the life experience to get that. And so that's such a dangerous thing when they grab on pull a thread of what they see and create, they draw conclusions and make judgments and think, oh, that's how I need to be, that's how I need to look, it's just, we've got our work cut out for us. Oh gosh. So anyway, I feel like we've probably got, what, I've got to get you on again, and we've got to have more conversations, because I think this is so it's so empowering and so beneficial for parents to hear from, lots of different people from different walks of life, but particularly dads. I think they're underrepresented in the, in some of these kind of parenting groups online. Obviously there are dad groups out there, but is there something you can leave the mums and the dads with, either a bit of advice or something, sort of focusing in on dads and fatherhood and getting rid of that old paradigm, those old traditions?
It comes back to, and I've kind of said it a few times through the interview now, be authentically you as a parent, and for the dads, be authentically you as a dad. Don't feel like you need to hold up to what happened in the past, because it's not something that, for me, and one of my favorite quotes is a Carl Jung quote about, the greatest burden a child can carry is the unlived life of the parent. So for me, it's to live your life and set that example for your child, because that's what they'll be looking for. And we can talk about, again, what happens on social media, what happens, even the generational stuff, but, ultimately they're looking at you for guidance. They're looking at you for what to do. They're looking at you for, how to cope in a certain situation. And it's not so much feeling the pressure and the weight of all of that, but don't hold back from what you do. Don't try and be that perfect parent. Don't portray that you're a perfect parent. Be okay with making mistakes. Be okay with saying sorry, showing emotion, whether it be angry, sadness, crying, any of that. Be okay with all of that. Break that stigma down. It's just one of the things that we as parents, we just need to, keep displaying, keep putting out for our kids. And, I think, and as other parents, to support parents in those situations as well. I heard a really good quote earlier this week, is the world needs more voices, not echoes. So let's stop echoing that, those old paradigms. Let's stop echoing, because those old paradigms, they're going to hang on. They're going to hang on, and they're actually going to be louder than the new paradigms. Because, generally the people of that ilk will think that way was better. And there's that new way forward, that unknown. Oh, that's not right, because we fear the unknown. We fear how that's going to look.
Yeah.
But all I say now, like, look at where we've come from. Look at where we are now. Do we want to go backwards, or do we want to go forwards? There's so much change happening in the world now. Some really good things, really positive things, some really dark things that are happening in the world. And you've just got to look at where that came from. That was the past. Sort of dragging the past into the present. Now's the time to set, a new paradigm, to set a new normal. We don't want an old normal. We don't want that. We want to let that go. We want to move forward with a new normal, and we want to normalise, that way of parenting. And this is my belief. I'm not saying it's the right way, but this is my belief of how we'll move forward. How our kids will, how our men will be able to freely be men. Men cry, men have emotions, men have feelings. Get rid of that toxic masculinity, get rid of that, all of that stuff, because it's just, we need to start, having that conversation to move forward. And, and to sum it up, we can only do what is in control of ourselves. So, think local, think global, act local. So do what you can do for you, right? So start with you. Hold the mirror up to yourself. If your child's not holding the mirror up to you, hold the mirror up to yourself. So when your little boy falls over and you go, pick yourself up, nothing wrong, think, okay. I'm not saying overthink, because that's definitely, one of my greatest blessings and curses, but, think about it for a second. Is that going to serve them? Let them cry. Ask them if they're okay. Ask them if it scared them. Let them know that, if it's not okay, that, that's okay. And be there, hold them, loved, seen, supported, heard. Give them that stuff. Because, they're the next generation. And for me, every generation is better than the last. That for me is just nature. That's just the way it's going to be. And we can say now that, it's not going to be good and stuff like that. And, and the older people will say, I was better in mine. We didn't have social media and all that kind of stuff. But every generation is going to be better. And we're getting better, but we need to break down all those stigmas.
Yeah, we've still got a long way to go. But like you said, it starts with us, the individual, with our family, with our kids, with our boys and our girls, obviously. But I think the work that you're doing around the podcast, Dads Lifting Dads, and the Best Self Movement, you're one of the few that I know who are being able to not just impact your family and your two beautiful little kids, Betty and Axel, but you're spreading and reaching so many more, and hopefully over time more and more and more dads and more mums if they jump on and listen. And with that, I want to ask, if people do want to get in touch with you or follow your work or listen to your podcast, where can they sort of find you? Where can they contact you and things like that?
So the best place to find me is on Instagram at a dad lifting dads, or one word. I've got the Dad's Lifting Dad podcast out, so that's available on iTunes, Spotify, and most of the other podcast platforms. And me and Betty do a podcast as well, Life Lessons from a Toddler. So again, that's available on Spotify, iTunes, and that's our little passion project we do together. But that has a hugely deep meaning, because that for me is everything that Betty's taught me over 4.5 years, kind of summed up in a 10-minute kind of podcast. So yeah, and to be honest, like, I scratched the surface of how deep I could go here. So if anyone wants to reach out, dads, mums, anyone, to further the conversation, to ask specific things, please do. Because I think we're all, one of the biggest things for me, and it was highlighted with it wasn't highlighted as much when Betty was born, and I don't know why, but when Axel was born, was how powerful community is. And we don't all have the answers as parents, and again, that's one of the stigmas we need to break down as well. Everyone looks at mums and dads, or mums specifically, and I know that's a burden for mums to carry, that you're going to be okay, you'll be right. But community for me is just such a powerful tool to be able to not only ask for help, but to also look at what people are doing, and that for me is why I jumped in on your community, was because it's just not only something that I align with, but there's so many differing kind of ways to look at things, and so many tools that I can then pick up for my toolkit to move forward. And I think we need to share that with and have that love and compassion for each other, because it's not, it's not an easy, being a parent's not easy. It takes a lot of effort. And the last thing we need to do is start tearing each other down because our beliefs in parenting are different. Again, it's not an us versus them thing, but let's have the conversation, a conversation that comes from love and compassion, and move forward with that. It's okay to have two differing perspectives. We can still coexist.
Yes. Yeah, we kind of forget that we're actually part of a collective, of a whole unit. We're connected through this, probably getting in a different wavelength, but we are, it comes back to that, it takes a village, and we are part of a village. We're all connected anyway. I love that you said we shouldn't tear each other down or judge, and as best we can not to do that, but to lift each other up, and like dads lifting dads, and support each other there. So I want to say a huge thank you for giving us your time tonight and sharing not just about your story and the podcast and things like that, but actually those deeper layers of yourself. So freely you sort of shared and opened up, and that, I think, in itself is, well, we know from Brené Brown that vulnerability equals courage, and so it takes a lot of courage and bravery to, particularly for a dad, I think, to be able to open up and show those tough moments and those wounds, and it just normalizes it for the other mums and dads and the other parents watching. So that's a massive heartfelt thank you for me to you.
Thank you. It's been like I said at the start, I'm extremely humbled to be able to share the tiniest bit of my story, and just extremely grateful for you and your community, and to have this conversation. I think we can still still could have gone for hours and hours about and we've only again scratched the surface. Wait until we geek out about neuroscience and development and things like that. So but thank you very much for having me.
Yes, guys, I will definitely have to get Dan back on in the future. And thank you for everyone sending their questions through. If you have any other questions, as he said, get in touch with him. The Instagram was A Dad Lifting Dads, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I even confused myself with
Yeah.
it. So yeah.
And then you can obviously find his podcast. So I'll put all the links and stuff in the notes. You'll be able to see that. So thank you, Dan, and thank you guys for tuning in tonight and watching. And I hope you guys got something out of it. I know I did. I'm going to go and have some heartfelt conversations with my husband, and just I love that it's just open the conversation, open the topic, and I think so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks. See you guys.